Welcome everyone. My name is Dev. I'm an Associate Dean of Admissions here at Reed College, and I am excited to welcome you all to our faculty office hour session. Today's session is all about the economics department. So I'm going to pass it over to our one of our phenomenal faculty members here who will be presenting on the economics department. Sorry, one more thing before we get started. If you do have questions after the presentation, the chat box is where you'll want to put those questions. So what I will do is I will read out your questions for the presentation, and Denise, our faculty member here, will answer the questions from the chat box as I read them out loud. We are recording this session for use for our website, so you will find that you won't be able to unmute yourself. Instead, we're going to ask everyone put their questions in the chat box, and that's where we'll get your questions from and make sure that we get as many answered as we can. All right, that's all I have.
Hi, I'm Denise Hare. I'm on the faculty of the economics department. I'm currently the department chair. That's a rotating position, so I'll be chair for another year or so, and then somebody else will step in. So it might be by the time you take an economics class or have an economics question, you might be encountering a different chair, but I will be chair next year again. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the major, a little bit about the courses that we offer in our faculty. And then, as Dev said, we'll be opening it up to your questions. So I'm curious to hear more about what you're interested in, what you want to know. I can tell you that our major is a total of 10 courses. And that's out of, let's see, in 4 years, you typically take 7 or 8 courses per year. So that's out of a total of 30 credits that you're required to finish for graduation. And so 10 of those courses, then 10 of those units would be in economics. Aside from the economics courses that you'd be doing, there's also college requirements, group distribution requirements at the college level. And then if you're majoring in economics, you're part of the Division of History and Social Sciences. So the division carries some requirements in addition. The divisional requirements together come to 4 courses. So essentially, by choosing to be an economics major, you're dedicating essentially half of your coursework at Reed to economics and other social sciences. So just to kind of get a picture of what that means. But then the group distribution requirements are going to take you to all the other far corners of the college. So you would be taking some sciences, some math, some literature, some humanities. So you get a really broad range of exposure to different disciplines just by kind of checking off all the boxes that are required to graduate. So within the economics major, as I said, we have the 10 units are required. That includes 2 units of thesis, so it's 8 courses. And the starting point for the major is our Econ 201 class, Introduction to Economics. A lot of places are going to offer principles, principles of microeconomics, principles of macroeconomics. We call our course intro because we shoot above the principles level. So we cover more in our intro course than what you would typically get at other 4-year institutions. And so if in case there's any transfer students out there, if you're thinking about coming into transfer at Reed, you'll want to talk to one of us, but we offer a placement exam. It's often a good idea, even if you've had economics courses elsewhere, to start with our intro course. But what you would want to do is talk to a member of the department and consider taking a placement exam over the summer before you get here to figure out whether your previous work is going to exempt you, step you up into our curriculum. Our intro course is a really good place to start because it's very wide. It covers both microeconomics and some discussion of the macroeconomy. We do consumer theory, producer theory. We look at monopoly. We do a little bit of game theory. We talk about public goods, externalities. So it really exposes you to a real wide array of topics that prepares you then really, really well to move ahead in our curriculum in almost any direction you want to go. So we've structured our curriculum to be really, really flat so that once you've completed that first semester, you're open to take almost any other course that we teach. There's a few exceptions, but not very many. So essentially that 1201 course opens you up to a full range of 300 level courses, both theoretical, kind of core to our major courses, as well as all the different applied electives that we teach that, you know, let you think about the environment or the labor market or development or gender, you know, whatever. To move along in the major after you finish intro, you're required to take 4 elective courses, which, as I said, we've got this wide menu, wide array of things that you choose, mostly based on interest, based on who you like to take classes from, maybe based on your schedule, on the course schedule, which semester, right? You know, a lot of different factors go into that. But there's a lot of freedom to choose there in terms of the 4 electives. In addition to the 4 electives, there's 3 courses that you're required to take to complete the major, and those represent the core of our discipline. So they include another microeconomics course building upon what you learned in intro, another macroeconomics course, which again builds on what you learned in intro, and then an econometrics course. Not much of that. That's basically statistics for economists. Not much of that is covered in intro. And so that is kind of a self-contained course where you learn the measurement tools of our discipline in a semester-long econometrics course. So you're exposing yourself more deeply, right, to the tools and the theory of our discipline through those 3 courses. And the idea is that you would take those at some point during your sophomore, ideally your sophomore or your junior year, as long as you get them in within that window. Then you're in good shape to start our thesis in your senior year. So that's the final 2 units that brings you to 10 is you're doing a 1-year thesis that begins in the fall, continues into the spring. And I don't know, that might seem kind of daunting at this point, right? But the thing is, every student who graduates from Reed has written a thesis. So if they can do it, you can do it. And it's really kind of a unique kind of experience because you get to pick the topic. You decide what kind of question you're going to investigate. You decide how you're going to go about that. You're responsible for finding the materials that are going to inform you. You're responsible for finding the materials that are going to help you, you know, answer your question, make some kind of recommendations or draw some conclusions. So it's a really wide open experience that really gives you some tools for analytical thinking and measurement, and then lets you loose to go out and try and figure out how to answer a question like that. You work one-on-one with an advisor. We meet with our advisees once a week, and so you get a lot of guidance, a lot of suggestions about what to read. We're reading what you're writing. You don't just sit down and write it all the night before it's due, right? But you're writing little sections of it all along, starting from the first week. We get you started writing up pieces of it. So it's not such a daunting exercise. So we're reading what you're writing, and you're reading and thinking and so on. So that's kind of the culmination of the Reed experience in your senior year to get to do a project like that. I have 3 thesis students who are finishing this spring, and then another one who's just going to get started and is going to graduate in the fall. The 3 students who are working with me this spring, one of them is working on Islamic finance, and in particular, how countries decide to follow Islamic principles in terms of their foreign direct investment. So looking at both host countries like Indonesia, which gets a lot of Islamic foreign direct investment, and donor countries like Saudi Arabia, which are the source of a lot of Islamic foreign direct investment. So that's what one student is working on. Another student is doing kind of a comparative case study of Bangladesh and Cambodia and focusing on women in the manufacturing sector. So it's a development thesis that looks at gender and development, particularly in the manufacturing sector, with this comparative component of Bangladesh versus Cambodia. And then the third student is working on India, and he is looking at how an income stability program is distributed. So kind of looking across the country at what are the targets of this income stability program and trying to figure out whether economic factors or political factors are more important in determining where the funding is sent. So you can see all three of these have kind of a development component to them, and that's because I work in development economics is one of my areas. So I can tell you a little bit about kind of the span of fields and areas that we cover with our faculty here at Reed. Besides myself, there's another woman, Lindsay Novak, who also works in development. Her region of specialty is mostly in Africa, whereas I work more in Asia and China. She also focuses especially on health in the development area, whereas I focus more on labor markets. So between us, we sort of cover those two parts of the world. And then we have Felipe Carrera, who is an economic historian, but also has interest in development. And his area of focus is Latin America. So I think it's pretty cool that we really cover these three major continents of the world in terms of our faculty interest and faculty experience. Outside of development, we also have other faculty who are working on industrialized, rich countries. John Rourke is a public finance economist who also teaches courses in game theory, and he teaches our microeconomic core course. And his area of focus is at the state level, looking at what states do in terms of their budgets, their taxes, and their spending. Noella Nettisel is a environmental economist, and she works a lot right here locally in Portland and Oregon, thinking about green spaces and how they affect the city budgets, how they affect real estate values. She's really done a lot here in terms of sort of understanding how the local real estate markets work and how development of new green spaces can affect those markets. We are hiring somebody to come in the fall. His name is Eustace Dinauskas, and he's currently teaching at London School of Economics and did his PhD at York University. He's going to be teaching some international economics courses for us next year, as well as a new finance course. So we're excited that we're going to be able to offer a finance course for the first time. And then we have one more resident macroeconomist, Erin Cottle Hunt, and she teaches the macroeconomic theory course that you would take after taking intro. And her specialty area is research on Social Security. So that covers the current faculty that we have at this time. I can also say, besides the regular economics major that I described to you, we have another major option, which is called economics with a quantitative concentration. And that basically covers all the same courses. You do the same major as I described before, but in addition, you take 4 math courses. And those 5 math courses. Those 5 math courses are the equivalent of first-year calculus, second-year calculus, and then a semester of probability and statistics. And so adding those 5 courses to your schedule will give you the economics with quantitative concentration degree, if that's something that you're interested in having. Another option is going through environmental studies. You can do an environmental studies major with an economics concentration. And I would have to refer you to the environmental studies faculty to talk about their end of the courses. But in terms of economics, again, it's very similar to what I already described, except that you are opted out of one of the electives. So you're doing 3 electives rather than 4. And of those 3, 2 of them are in the environmental natural resource area. So it's definitely focusing, directing you towards more of a concentration in the environmental area. So that kind of covers the range of majors that we do. We also offer an economics minor. So if you're interested in majoring in another department, writing your thesis in another department, but you just really like economics and want to take a lot of it, then there's a minor option for you where you take our intro course, you take 2 of the 3 core courses. So remember I said there's macro, micro econometrics. You get to choose which 2 of those 3 you want to do. And then you're also required to take 2 of our elective courses. So that's then a total of 5 courses gets you to an economics minor. I think that covers all the sort of structural stuff. I guess I could say in terms of the elective courses, I've told you what we do is individually as faculty. So that should give you some eye to kind of the electives. We pretty much offer a lot of the same standard electives you're going to see everywhere. I think one of the things that maybe is a little bit different about Reed is that we tend to push students a little bit harder. So I think in an elective course, like I can tell you, for example, I'm teaching a labor economics elective course this semester called Jobs, Technology, and Trade. And so it's really kind of trying to understand what's going on in the labor market and why you've seen such a rapid rise in wage inequality in the US and also many other countries, but we focus especially on the US over the last 20 to 30 years. And so in that course, I have a textbook. I use a textbook. And so we're reading textbook chapters, but we're also reading a lot of journal articles. So for every textbook chapter we read, we're typically reading 2 or 3 journal articles as well. So this week, we had a textbook chapter for the Monday class. And then for the Wednesday class, students are reading 2 professional economics journal articles, and we're going to be contrasting what the authors argue. We're talking about labor unions this week. And there have been a lot of teacher strikes. Portland Public Schools had a teacher strike that went on for a whole month last fall. So that's something people have been interested in talking about. So tomorrow we're going to be reading 2 contrasting papers. One of them argues that giving teachers the opportunity to have collective bargaining, that means joining a union. One of those argues and provides evidence to say that that has a negative effect on student outcomes. The other paper also has evidence and makes an argument that it provides a positive impact on student outcomes. So students are required to read both papers, and then we're going to be looking at the evidence they show and contrasting kind of their methods and the historical moments that the papers are based in, the regions that they're looking at, trying to kind of understand why they're coming up with these 2 really contrasting conclusions. So I think that's an evidence of the kinds of things that we do here that really do tend to push you, right? We're trying to get you kind of into the heads of the professionals that are working in our field and looking at what they're thinking and why they're thinking that, why they're saying what they're saying. So pushing just beyond the textbook presentation of the material. And that would be true of all the electives we teach. I just picked up that one because it's the one that's freshest in my mind. Okay, so I think now I've sort of checked off all the things that I was supposed to get to, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was a phenomenal overview. So got some questions coming in the chat box. The first one was sent to me directly, and the question is, this person is maybe not the best at math, or their math skills might not be as strong as they would like it to be. Would economics still be a good major for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I didn't really get into detail on that. So for our intro course, we need you to be able to do what we would call high school algebra. So solve equations, maybe once in a while solve a system of equations, be able to take a linear equation and imagine how to graph that, right? So y is a function of x is on the horizontal axis, y is on the vertical axis, right? That you can essentially visualize where that line would be placed given the equation. So we do a lot of supply and demand analysis that's relying on those kinds of linear equations. So that's the level of math that you would see in the intro course. So being comfortable with linear equations and graphing linear equations. The next course, well, you have some flexibility as to the order that you take the courses, but a lot of people would then move into microeconomic theory. Microeconomic theory, if you're proceeding to the major, that's the only course that has a math prerequisite, and it requires that you have either 1 semester of calculus at Reed, excuse me, or that you talk to the professor and kind of talk about what your calculus background is. So if you've taken a year of calculus in high school, I think typically that's going to be enough. What you need to be able to do for microeconomic theory is take derivatives. We don't even integrate. All you have to do is to be able to take a derivative, and you just do that over and over and over again. So you get really good at it. So to take that course, you would sit down and have a conversation with the instructor. Either you've had that material in high school, or you take the class at Reed, that would be Math 111, or he recommends books. Sometimes students sort of do that self-study on their own. So we call that an implicit requirement because we don't explicitly say you have to take calculus to be an economics major, but we have this one course that does have a calculus prereq. And so you need to be able to do some really simple calculus derivations in order to be successful in that class. Otherwise, for macroeconomics, we give you two options. We give you a math heavy option for the people who like math, and then we give you a math light option for the people who don't really want the mathematical formulas. And the same thing for econometrics. We do the math heavy option, which is Econ 312, and we do the math light option, which is Econ 311. So aside from Econ 313 microtheory, you can pick and choose and choose the less math intensive options. If you're thinking about doing graduate school in economics, you want to take as much math as possible. So that's why we try and offer both, because for some people, the math is going to be really, really important in getting them to where they want to be, their next step. Whereas for other people, if the math isn't that important, there's a certain level that we expect, but as long as you're comfortable working at that level, then you'll be fine.
Great, thank you. The next question is around the senior thesis project. So could a senior thesis project in economics be interdisciplinary in nature, involving other courses such as political science or computer science? And then, so that's the first question. So I'll stop there and ask the second part after that answer.
So the Reed curriculum works is you really do pick a discipline that you center yourself in. And so then you're writing a thesis that's very much within that discipline. So it doesn't lend itself all that well to blending across departments. Some departments have designed these standing interdisciplinary majors. So I think, for instance, computer science and math, I think there's a way to do a blended math computer science major. I think there's like a history theater major, right? I mean, there's certain departments where there's relationships between the two departments where you have that standing interdisciplinary opportunity. We haven't set that up aside from our participation in environmental studies. So the way it works in environmental studies is you're exposed to a broad range of disciplines, but then you actually still write your thesis within economics, but you're writing it on an environmental topic. So our theses are very much within our discipline. If you have strong interest in another discipline, what we recommend that you do is you major in that discipline, write your thesis in that discipline, and then do an economics minor. And that gives you the structured exposure to our discipline, but it keeps your major sort of centered in your thesis centered in whatever is the discipline of your major. So that's been our approach. It's not that we're not interested in seeing you work with other disciplines. It's just that so much about the thesis experience, it's a very academic experience, and academics is organized around disciplines. And so it kind of runs counter to the whole purpose of the thesis if we start having you scattering yourself and trying to sort of sort out, right, multiple disciplinary perspectives at the same time. They kind of get in the way of each other, and it tends to weaken the overall product.
Great, thank you. I'm going to skip ahead to another question because it kind of goes back to our math question. So if derivatives is the only thing that is important for the micro theory course, then would it be possible to attend tutoring or otherwise teach oneself in order to take the course? Or is an official high school or college calculus course required?
So I can't answer that. That's really the person who's teaching the course. I think officially what it says on the course is prerequisite is reads Math 111 or permission of the instructor. And so that's why I said you have a conversation with the instructor in the semester, right? The semester that you're planning to register for the course. So it would be too early. Nobody could give you the answer now, because you wouldn't be taking the course yet. But at the point when you're preparing to register for the course, then you would reach out to that professor and say, hey, here's my background, here's what I know, what do you need from me in order for me to be able to register for your course?
Perfect. Next question. I believe that you mentioned that this major would focus more on microeconomics, but you also mentioned that students would choose their own path in terms of courses. Is there a path to study more macroeconomics for students, or does the major mostly consist of microeconomics?
I think the major is pretty balanced, right? Because you've got the three core courses. One of them is micro, one of them is macro, one of them is econometrics. So I don't see that as being tilted in either direction. Our intro course is a little bit more heavily tilted towards micro. So at the intro level, you're going to see out of 13 weeks, you're going to see 8 or 9 weeks of micro and 3 or 4 weeks of macro. But then once you're through intro, then the whole major is open to you and it's really up to you to choose. But you do have to take the three macro, micro econometrics. That part is required. And then the elective options are up to you.
Great. This one might be more of a specific question. I'm going to ask it anyways because I think it talks about transfer students as a whole. But this particular student is a prospective transfer student. At their current school, they will have completed both the macro and micro economics as well as business statistics. Can you talk a little bit more about transfer credit and transfer evaluations within the economics department, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to give any kind of a complete answer here. My understanding is that somebody evaluates this and gives kind of a preliminary evaluation. I'm not sure at what point we as the department see your courses. My sense is often that happens after you've arrived here. We do have the placement exam. I would definitely recommend that you look into taking the placement exam in the summer when that comes around. It used to be we had it during orientation week after you arrived, but I think now it's done online earlier in the summer. And so you would really want to take that exam in order to have information about where you would place in the curriculum. So that's a really important element because that determines whether or not the background that you have from the courses you've taken already is going to be sufficient to place ahead in the curriculum, or whether we're going to ask you to start with our intro course. We're pretty good at making things fit so that, even when transfer students start with our intro course, we then move them along through the major. You can take aside from intro, you would typically just take that by itself because it's a prerequisite for everything else, right? But in the next semester, you can sort of start loading up on coursework. And so that helps you move quickly. Even though we say there's 10 units, it doesn't mean necessarily that they're spread over 10 different semesters. So if you're able to load up on courses and take multiple in a single semester, you're still able to get through the major in, 2.5, 3 years.
God, sorry, my mouse is lagging, so it takes me a second to get off mute. Awesome, thank you. I am going to kind of jump around here and ask if uh, can you talk about study abroad opportunities for economic students? Are there any specific that economic students tend to gravitate towards?
Yeah, we don't really have programs that we try and send people to, but it kind of depends on student interest. Um, Sometimes students do study abroad because they've come in with a language or they've learned a language after they came to read, and they want to go do the language study for a semester. And so then it really wouldn't overlap all that much with economics at all because they may be taking language or literature or film or, sort of culture culture courses in that semester. And I think the major is typically flexible enough to allow that because we don't have a real strong hierarchy. You know, if you get started early and plan carefully, it's not hard. It's certainly not impossible, and it's really not even hard to clear one semester where you don't have to take any economics at all, right? And then that frees you up. You can go anywhere in the world, do any program you want. So I think most of our students who are going abroad, it's kind of that kind of thing, right? They're going off to do something else that interests them that's outside of economics, that's taking them to another country. But if you really want to study economics and go abroad and do both at the same time, they do have a few programs set up that let you do that. Typically, then those are going to be programs where you're studying in English, right? Because you can't count on somebody having foreign language fluency, you know, that would enable them to study the content material in another language. So then you're looking at English-based programs. And so we've sent students to Trinity and Dublin. We send some students to Oxford. We've sent some students to London School of Economics. The Oxford program actually operates through Sarah Lawrence College. Trinity, I think we have the agreement with them directly. LSE, we have the agreement with them directly. I have had one or two students study economics in Paris, but they had pretty good French. So that's what enabled them to do that. And they had some really interesting experiences. One of the neat things about going abroad is that you can get different perspectives, right? You can, you know, we did have a student go to Australia and took a course on the Australian economy, right? That's the kind of thing you can do, right? When you go abroad, is pick up some electives that we may not offer. So definitely it's possible. It's not super hard. It's definitely possible. I would say try and start planning in your first year in terms of sort of how you're going to coordinate the courses in order to make that happen for you easily.
Great, thank you. And then research is a question that's kind of come up in the chat a few times, and I know from my background working with prospective students, questions around research is big. We've talked a little bit about or actually we've talked pretty extensively about the thesis. Are there other research opportunities within the economics department, and what might that look like?
Yeah, so I would say there's opportunities within the department and then more broadly in terms of the college. I would encourage everybody here to go on the Reed website, go to the Center for Life Beyond Reed. That's what in the old days we called it our career placement office, right? But now it's the Center for Life Beyond Reed. And they've got all kinds of information and resources. And in particular, look for the page where they list all of the Reed-sponsored fellowships and grants, because there's just an unbelievable array of opportunities that are funded entirely within Reed. And so they're only for Reed students, right? So your competition pool isn't that big because there's a lot of opportunities there. And, you know, not necessarily every student is going to apply for something. So chances of getting awarded one of those, if you're persistent and really show that, you know, you're committed and wanting to do something. I mean, I think most people find that they can get some success there. And so through that office, you can get funding to find internships, can be in the local Portland area, can be nationally, can be abroad, where you're doing, you know, really anything that you want to design for yourself, where you find a host organization that you can work with and work for, and you can get funding to support yourself, right, while you're doing that for a summer, for maybe a break between semesters. There's also money for you to design your own independent research project, summer opportunity grants, where you just kind of design what you want to do, and you can get funding to do that. So those are student initiated kinds of opportunities, and those are just a couple, right? It's a long list. There's a lot of things there. But within the department, then we also faculty are all doing research. We're all doing our own projects. And typically we're asking 2 or 3 students each summer to work with us on those projects. And, you know, There's no rule to say like we only work with juniors or we only work with sophomores, right? Every year it's kind of different, right? You find students that click with you, students that are really interested in your project, have taken a lot of classes with you. And then, that can be a very productive partnership where the student is picking up maybe some programming or coding skills or learning to read the literature a little bit more broadly and write literature reviews, or going out and looking up data, finding data sources, or maybe doing interviews. So kind of depends on the nature of the project, what the student would be doing. But we are able to bring, a good number, maybe 10 students into our projects every summer, not 10 each, but 10 across the department as a whole. So that's another opportunity that we do right here within the department.
For the economics program, are there specific classes related to personal finance or maybe some more business administration type classes? If someone wanted to learn about emerging markets and business opportunities in the field, what career opportunities can you build on at Reed?
So that's a very timely question, because until now, the answer would have been no, we haven't had the capacity to offer that. But there's going to be 2 courses in next year's schedule that both have the word finance in them. So one of them is going to be a course on personal finance, that's going to be a half-unit course offered in the fall, with no prerequisite. So it's going to be a 100 level course, no prerequisites. So, and they're saving, I think, about half the seats for first year students. So it really is aimed at first year students to take that course. And then there's going to be a financial economics course offered in the spring that will have an intro prerequisite. So you'll have to take Econ 201 first, but that's going to be a traditional finance course that teaches you about financial instruments and how economists analyze financial markets. I don't know how much it's going to get into emerging markets, right? That might be like 1 week on the syllabus or something. But that's something that you could explore with the professor after you get here. Um, as said, we do offer courses in development economics, so that's a little bit of more about understanding kind of the economic health of poor countries and what particular challenges they face. And so it's not really so much about designing your investment portfolio, but certainly gives you an opportunity to learn more about other parts of the world like Africa, Asia, and Latin America. So we definitely do offer expertise on those areas, but you're not going to see emerging markets in any of those course titles.
What advice would you give to students who are planning? This question says planning to minor in economics, but I think just in general, what advice would you give students who might be thinking about economics as a major or a minor?
So I'd say try and take economics your first year. And we try and offer enough sections. It kind of depends on staffing. We'd like to offer an infinite number of intro sections, and we'd like to offer finance and accounting and emerging markets, in addition to everything else, right? But it's a lot of it is just about staffing, right? Having the number of bodies that we need, and the right people here to offer all that. But try and get into intro econ. It doesn't really matter if you take it fall or spring, so don't worry if the fall sections are closed. Pick up a spring section. If you get closed out of both semesters, which is really unlikely, because I don't think any of our sections closed this year in the end. So it's really unlikely. But if for some reason you can't squeeze it in your first year, I would say for sure at least take it by fall of your sophomore year. So as long as you get your intro econ in one of the first 3 semesters of your time at Reed, it's, especially with the minor, it's no problem to complete the minor, but even the major, it's really not too hard to complete the major as long as you get it underway in one of those first 3 semesters, because what you can do then is start loading up on electives. And if you're getting your core courses in your junior year, you're fine. That's what we want you to do, is have your core courses done by the end of your junior year. So really the most important thing is get into Econ 201, Intro Econ in one of your first 3 semesters. The earlier, the better, of course, but don't sweat it if that doesn't work. One of the first 3. And then otherwise, choose your other courses with an eye to the requirement structure. So, think about the other courses, like take it because you like it, but also take it because it works towards your graduation. Right. So keep in mind, you've got to take 3 of the group 1 courses and 3 of the group 3, keep in mind how you're progressing through those other requirements so that you're not finding yourself suddenly, senior year, you still have to do like 2 group requirements and your thesis and a divisional, you don't want to be in that boat. So talk to your advisor right from the beginning about, making sure that you're setting up an efficient schedule, right, that gets you through the courses you want to take, but also helps you check things off the list at the same time.
Awesome. There's some questions that have come in, kind of going back to the thesis project. What are, you mentioned some of the theses of the students that you're working with. Could you give some more examples of other types of thesis projects that have come out of the economics department? Are there any popular, maybe topics or sort of subgenres within economics that students tend to lean towards?
I don't think so. I mean, I think our department has grown and we have a much bigger faculty that we really cover the bases really, really well. So I don't feel like there's like just certain pockets, right, that everybody's working in this and nobody's doing this other thing. I mean, I just think it's really, really broad. Some of the other theses, we're on orals boards, and so we read other students' theses as well. And I'm just reading one right now where a student is looking at the effect of natural disasters on income inequality. And he's working with John Rourke, who is the public finance guy I mentioned, who does a lot of state level stuff. So he's looking at states in the US and sort of how they experience natural disasters and how that affects income inequality in that state. So that's one. Another one I read over the weekend, that all the first drafts are coming in, so that's why I'm reading so many drafts right now. Another one that came in over the weekend is looking at Peru's educational structure. So it's focused on education, but we have students working on health, on education, on public finance. Oh, last semester, um, I was on a macro thesis board where she was looking at one of Biden's proposals. I'm thinking build back better or something, but it was a subset of that. But it was a big infrastructure plan that he had proposed. And she was projecting what the effects of that were going to be on the US federal budget and then on economic growth over like the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So it was really interesting because you have this big spending outlay now, right, to build a bunch of infrastructure. And then you have debt, right? And you have to pay that debt back. And at what point does it generate enough income growth to offset the debt payments? That was kind of, what she was doing in the spirit of her analysis, was try to answer that question and looking at it under a variety of different assumptions. So that's an example of a macro thesis that somebody has done recently. So they really are very, very wide and varied. Hopefully that gives you a little bit better sense of that.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And a specific request around circular economy. I am not familiar with that term, so I'm going to ask and assume you are. But have any students done any like research or theses around circular economy?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is either. Is there more context? I'm looking at the chat. Is that a written question?
Yeah, it was a
Maybe
written question. So
if
maybe
there's more context.
yeah, I'll ask the student to provide some more context, and we'll jump ahead to the next question. It sounds like the program here within Reeds is a pretty international perspective of economics. Would you agree with that? Would you say that's true? Or do most students sort of take an international sort of lens to economics as a whole?
Well, I'm not sure that that's true. I described that several of us have interests outside of the US, but we also have faculty who are working on questions in the US. So, I think, again, I think we really kind of run the gamut. I mean, it's a little confusing too, because you can say that you're working on an economic question or topic that is located, like I work on China's labor markets, right? But international economics, by definition, is a specific field in economics, which looks at how countries engage with one another. And so, as I said, we're hiring this new economist that's coming to join us from London next year. And his field is in international economics. So his area of expertise is looking at the actual ways in which countries engage, right, in terms of trade, in terms of financial interactions, exchange rates. This might get back to the person who wants to know more about emerging markets, right? We're going to have a course on international finance next spring. And so that's a course where you look at exchange rates, right? And how currencies move in tandem or in opposition to each other, how countries make policies around that, why countries even like, why do you have the euro, right? Why do some countries choose to band together and form a currency union? Some countries peg their currencies directly to the US dollar. Why would they do that, right? So those are the kinds of questions that will be asked and hopefully answered in international finance. So again, I mean that's one field within economics, but I wouldn't necessarily say that we as a department try to push that on people, right? If you're interested in it, we have it, but we have a lot of other things too.
Great, thank you so much. Is the wealth of nations important to all the courses within our economics department? And what sort of books or textbooks are used in the program?
That's kind of a classic, but it's certainly not a prerequisite. I mean, that might be the kind of book that you want to read, like maybe the first summer, after your first year, or maybe after you graduate. I mean, it's kind of a nice book to have on your shelf. Um, that's the kind of book you would read if we offered a history of economic thought course, right? Where we kind of look at the old masters and what they contributed and how our discipline developed. We don't have anybody teaching that course right now. We have in the past. It'd be fun to have that course back on our catalog, but we're not offering that course. That's the kind of elective that you might look to get if you go abroad, or transfer the course in from somewhere else. We do offer economic history. I was mentioning Felipe Carrera will teach American economic history, which looks kind of at America's historical economic development, right? So what was the American economy like in the 20s, right? Maybe what caused the stock market crash? How did policy respond to that economic disaster in ways that are different than the policy responses we see today? So that's a slightly different historical approach, right? To sort of go back in history and use modern economic tools to understand what was happening then. So we do offer courses like that, but we're not right now offering the specific course that looks at sort of how our own discipline developed over time. So that would be the kind of thing that you would do either as work elsewhere or just as your own independent reading. I mean, it would be fascinating. So I'm glad to know that you have those books. I would encourage you to look into them, but you're not going to find them on your intro syllabus or on the syllabus of the courses that we're offering right now.
Um, we talked a little bit about CLBR, that Center for Life Beyond Read. What are some, for the students who are wanting to go into the workforce after Reed rather than maybe do grad school, what types of careers do these students end up going into? Does it tend to sway more public policy and education? Is it something more private? What are some of the students in our program stepped into?
Yeah, so we do send students into like your typical econ major. Often you think, oh, they're going to go work in banking, right? We do send students into investment banking and finance, analyst kind of jobs. So that's an option, but it's not where most of our students go. So if it's what you want to do, certainly we can support you. And we've sent students that direction in the past, and we can connect you with alum who are working in those areas. So it's definitely a possible path. But I don't think you're going to find it as dominating as you might in the conventional sort of thought of an econ major as somebody who only wants to be a banker and nothing else. Our econ majors, are very broad and interested in going in a lot of different directions. So we do send a lot of people into policy work, government jobs, into nonprofits, into academic and other kinds of research organizations. So some of them are in more sort of advocacy roles. Others are in more of the sort of just hard analysis, research assistant, mining the data and coding and that kind of thing. Um, we send people after they've been out for a while, sometimes want to go back for degrees. We send people back to school for law degrees, for business degrees, for management degrees, for public policy degrees. Professional schools often prefer that you've worked for a few years before you return and get like a professional master's degree. So it's pretty common for our students to go out into the workforce for a few years and then think about further schooling after they've had a few years of experience. I just wrote a letter for a student this fall that's going to be joining Princeton's public policy school. And he's been working, he actually started with, I can't remember if he went to the Fed or National Economic Research Associates, but I know he started after Reed in an economic analyst position, and he did that for about a year. And then he said he wanted to do something, I think he used the word more meaningful or something, and he went to the Brennan Center for Justice. And it's in New York, and he was with them and thinking he wanted to go to law school. But then he jumped positions, I think, again, and I can't remember who he's with, but for years now, he's been working on prison reform. And he's become this specialist in prison reform, and he travels around to states and helps them when they're interested in doing projects. He's become like this authority on the topic, and is now going to be going to public policy school at Princeton, with wanting to continue in that line of work. So you see, he started as economics major, right? And now he's doing something in the policy realm that he probably never imagined he was going to be doing, when he was doing his degree at Reed. So, Reed will lead you to a job, but then that job leads you to another job or to a school opportunity. And it's hard to predict now what path you're finally going to end up on.
Now that's awesome. That's such a great example too. I would love to sort of talk a little bit more about the actual classroom experience in the economics department. I know Reed is a pretty conference modeled class structure, very discussion heavy, conversation heavy. Um, how does that sort of work within the economics department? How do you often see students engaging in the classrooms? And then a second part to that question is our grading model. Our grading model at Reed is very feedback sort of oriented. How does that unfold itself within the economics department as well?
Yeah, so a lot of the kind of assignments we give in economics tend towards more kind of quantitative assessment, so a lot of problem sets. And I always give points on problem sets. I always write a fraction, how many points, like 18 out of 23, right? How many points you got and how many points were possible. I never withhold that. And I also show how many points you got on each question. And then I circle, if they see where maybe if you made an error, I try to, so it's probably going to look a lot like the kind of feedback that you would have been getting already in problem set kind of exercises. That doesn't really change. But like when it comes to a paper, when there's less of a quantitative assessment, I don't put letter grades on papers. And so there you're going to get, again, all my margin comments, and then I'm going to write a note at the end. Here's what worked really well. Here's something you can improve on. But then there's no final letter grade at the bottom of that, which might be a more traditional thing to do. So we're not, when we're handing work back, it's rare that professors are handing work back with a letter grade attached. But if it's natural to give a numerical point score, usually that's still going to be there. It would seem kind of silly to withhold that because that seems like an important component of the feedback. So the goal is to give you as much feedback as possible without making it seem like, is this just about the grade? And we do record grades, and so you have a report card, and you can ask for your grades at the end of the semester. And so where you ask for them is through your advisor. And I find it's about half-half. Half my advisees write to me on email and say, can you send me my end of semester grades? And about half of them don't. So, either way you go, you're in really good company. And in addition to the letter grades, professors have the option of writing comment cards, which I do if I feel like there's something really, really exceptional that I want to convey to the student. But typically at the end of the semester, I'm just giving them the letter grade. So then it's just kind of a question of, most people, I think, eventually look at their grades, but not everybody looks at their grades at the end of every semester. So usually I think people feel like they are getting a lot of feedback as the semester proceeds. So they probably have a pretty good idea of where they stand in the course, even if they don't ask for the actual grades. Oh, and then the question was, what's a conference like, right? Yeah, and that, in economics, that varies a lot. Our intro courses, there are big lecture components because there's just a lot of material there that we're trying to deliver to you. And the core theory courses, the core econometrics course, those also, I think, tend to be pretty heavy on the lecture side. And you try and make openings to have a more discussion-oriented format, like for maybe part of a day, or, maybe some days are special and, you can do a lot more of a discussion format. But there's just so much material to deliver there that you're gonna get a substantial lecture component. But in my elective courses, I really do try and create a lot more space for students to have conversations with each other. And it varies a lot by topic. It varies by class. Some classes are just more comfortable talking with each other. Some classes are kind of shy, and it can be hard sometimes, even if it's read and we're supposed to be conference based, right? Students can still be shy, and it's not always that, the conversation just flows easily. So sometimes I end up lecturing just because I'm trying to get the students to respond. Sometimes I want to lecture and they're so excited about the material that they squeeze me out. So it just really, there's a lot of variation there. And I think you guys can zoom in. Can they zoom in to visit some classes? Is that still an option? Not
Now,
anymore.
um,
Okay.
but,
Well,
it's
some of you probably came and visited and sat in on a class that way. And all I would say is that whatever you saw there, there's just as many instances that are different, right? Every read class is different. And even in the same class from Monday to Wednesday, it's going to be different. So it's hard to really characterize, right? But they all seem to work. It all works out well in the end. But if you think you wouldn't like discussion style, well, they're not all going to be like that, right? If you think you would like it, well, sorry, they're probably not all going to be exactly like that. But whatever is best for the material that's being taught and the set of students that are there, right? The professor is trying to do the best job for that particular set of circumstances. And so you'll get a lot of variation in terms of what your classroom experience is like.
awesome. Thank you so much for your time and telling us all about the economics program. That was definitely insightful. I know I learned quite a bit today, so that was something that I was really excited about. For all the folks that have attended this session, thank you all for your great questions. I hope this was helpful. Um, and you got a better glimpse into what the economics department at Reed is like. Thank you all so much, and everyone else, everyone, please have a great rest of your day wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much, Denise.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everyone.